As a teacher, it is your job to make sure every student is learning to the best of their ability. We know that each student learns at a different pace and has their specific needs when it comes to learning. Teachers use differentiation in their classroom to ensure that all students are getting the most of their education. Differentiation allows teachers to modify lessons for students so they can learn to the best of their ability. With differentiation, there are three key features. First, there's flexible group learning. This deals with grouping students based on prior assessment of student learning or interests. Groupings are sometimes determined by the student and sometimes by the teacher, and the students are grouped and regrouped regularly. Second, there are respectful tasks. This means tasks are interesting and engaging and require students to work at the edge of their current readiness. Lastly is continual assessment, which allows teachers to see where students are in their learning journey. Students are going to change on a day-to-day basis, and teachers should see what students are doing each day. This will allow the teacher to see who is with them, who is ahead, and who is behind. In addition, the teacher will be able to see what is working and what isn't. Through differentiation, student learning needs have to be taken into consideration. Readiness deals with the prior learning that students bring to a new concept. Teachers can determine student readiness through pre-assessments, mind maps, and checklists. Interests deal with a passion or curiosity for a topic or skill. Teachers can determine their students' interests by asking questions or through partner introductions. Lastly, a learning profile is providing different learning styles, such as presenting information auditory, visually, and kinesthetically, as well as allowing students to work alone or with a partner. Let's look at an example. In Mr. Carter's first grade class, the students are learning about hibernation. Mr. Carter reads a book about hibernation to the students and then discusses what the students have learned. Mr. Carter then has the students do a science experiment where he wants the students to understand why bears eat so much before they hibernate. To do this, Mr. Carter has the students put one hand in a plastic bag with shortening in it to represent the fat that the bears store, and the other hand will be in a plastic bag with no shortening. The students will then put an ice cube in each hand and see which hand gets colder first. Mr. Carter also has the students fill out a worksheet during the experiment so they can write down their predictions and results. This lesson will work for most of the students in his class. However, Mr. Carter needs to take into consideration that students have specific student learning needs. Chris is one of Mr. Carter's students who is very bright but has specific needs. Chris is deaf, and Mr. Carter modifies part of the lesson when teaching. In order for Chris to understand what Mr. Carter is saying, he faces Chris when speaking. This will allow Chris to lip read. In order for no student to block Mr. Carter and Chris sits in the front row so he can always see Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter also gives Chris a written copy with the directions for the day. This will allow Chris to read what Mr. Carter is having the students do. Mr. Carter also models what he wants the students to do so Chris can see what he will be doing in the experiment. Mary is another student in Mr. Carter's class. She has an orthopedic impairment and is in a wheelchair. Mr. Carter has to make sure the room is set up where Mary can access everything she needs. Her wheelchair needs to be able to fit everywhere in the room. Instead of using a desk, Mary uses a lap tray and a small table that will have adequate leg space for her wheelchair. In addition, Mary has a difficult time using her hands. Due to this lesson having the students use their hands the entire time, Mr. Carter has paired up Mary with a friend. Mary's friend can help put the plastic bag on her hand. In addition, instead of writing down her predictions and results, Mary will tell her friend or Mr. Carter orally, and they will write it down for her. Alice is a student with an anxiety disorder. Alice gets overwhelmed very easily if she has many tasks to do at once. She also has panic attacks in class frequently, and getting fresh air helps calm her down. Alice has a difficult time interacting with her peers for the fear of them making fun of her. For this lesson, Mr. Carter divides the work into small sections. This will allow Alice to take the science experiment one step at a time and be able to concentrate on each step instead of being overwhelmed with all steps. Mr. Carter also places Alice next to the window in the classroom. This will allow Alice to get fresh air anytime she needs it by opening the window. To help Alice with her social interactions, he arranges the desks in groups of 4. He has the students talk to one another throughout the experiment, telling each other their predictions. Mr. Carter explains to the class that there is no right or wrong answer to a prediction, which should ease up Alice's anxiety when it comes to talking to her peers. Lastly, John is a student with a traumatic brain injury. John has a hard time paying attention and concentrating as well as following directions. Mr. Carter clears off any unnecessary items on John's desk. This helps John not get distracted with items on his desk but can focus on what Mr. Carter is saying. In addition, Mr. Carter does the same thing for John that he did for Alice when it comes to breaking the science experiment down into simple and small steps. When it comes to following directions, Mr. Carter writes the steps on the board so John can refer back to them as needed. He also breaks down confusing steps for John so that he can understand what to do. In conclusion, when it comes to students in your classroom, it can be difficult to figure out how to differentiate among the students. This is where working in teams can be beneficial because it allows you to problem solve with others. You can use the RTI model, which allows you to group students based on their performance between 3 tiers.